Welcome once again to the Letterman Podcast. My name is Mike Chisholm. All right, I believe this is the first time. It might someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is the first time that we're shooting an intro in real time before an episode is released due to current events that have transpired. It is currently 12:27 a.m. in the Pacific Standard Time Zone. Earlier today, a bombshell announcement was dropped, which might be the biggest announcement in late night television, certainly in the last 10 years. But the biggest announcement ever, and that of course, Coldplay has a kiss cam scandal. No, not Coldplay. Colbert. Stephen Colbert has been canceled. And CBS has announced that after his contract expires in 2026, that the show will not continue. In fact, the franchise will not continue. The Late Show franchise is going to be shut down. The house that Dave built is going to be shut down. And there's a bunch of irony here. The irony is today's episode is going to be the founder of LateNighter.com, Jed Rosenzweig, and I mean I'm delighted to have him. When you hear the intro to the show that was shot a couple of weeks ago, you'll hear why. But ironically today, earlier today around 4:30, LateNighter.com put up the story, and many other outlets, of course, reported on that as well, about CBS making this bombshell announcement. Now, they cited financial reasons for this. Okay, Stephen Colbert is number one, of the house that Dave built. They never had a franchise at 11:30, and that was something that was very important to them. Obviously, regimes and leadership change, mediums do change. I get that. However, if they're going to still continue to be a television network, not having a late night show after 30 years plus of building not only a brand at that time for that network in Late Show, but one that competed against The Tonight Show and handily so with Stephen Colbert over this last 10 years since he took the mantle. Um, that's a big move. That's a big move, and I'm probably out of my depth here, because as you all know, I am daft, but um, I'm an educated daft. And my phone immediately started blowing up. I was at mixed martial arts with my granddaughter. Not me, she does it. She's 7 years old, and I was watching her prepare for a jiu-jitsu tournament that she's about to go into, and my phone just started vibrating like crazy. And of course, I saw the news. I went back and I've gone back and forth all night with all sorts of people, people who are in, the Letterman world, of course, that have become friendly with me, but people outside of that as well, other podcast hosts, radio people, people in that I talk with, and I happened to be uploading this episode. And I'll name drop. I was going back and forth with Robert Morton. I'll name drop because I love Morty, and I'll drop his name anytime that I can. And I said, there's no feeling like the feeling of uploading an episode that's going to be stale the moment it hits the internet broadcast airwaves. And he said, buddy, you got to shoot a live intro. And he was exactly right. And so that's what we're doing here. Because it's ironic. Jed and I have a phenomenal conversation. Um, and it's actually a little bit bullish and optimistic about the late night genre. And it's a lovely conversation. It's fantastic. But it doesn't talk about this. And this is ripped from the headlines. And obviously, a lot of people are going to be reporting about this in the next few weeks. Details are going to come out. Is the timing merely coincidental? I don't like tribal. I don't like creating tribal divisions. I really don't. I don't like polarization, and how it's been weaponized in this world. It might be the Canadian in me. I just wish everybody would find ways to collaborate, rather than compete. But at the same time, I mean, this merger that's happening with CBS Paramount or Paramount and Skydance. There have been articles over the last couple of weeks, and go check out the news archives in Late Nighter talking about are Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart's days numbered. A lawsuit from Donald Trump against CBS naming Colbert, all of that. That I mean, many, I think, myself included, thought to be frivolous. Stephen Colbert has really made a lot of bones in making fun of that administration. I would argue that he made fun of the other administration for the last, in the last 5 years as well. But boy, one has to wonder if free speech is under attack from this. It's the number one show in late night, and it's being canceled. And not only is it being canceled, they are erasing the franchise. I find it hard to believe that they're going to just give it back to the affiliates at 11:30. Again, what do I know? I'm a dunce. However, I want to be talking to some people over the next few weeks here that aren't dunces, that know a lot about this stuff, and I'm going to certainly strive to do that. And if appropriate, we will invite them and maybe talk about it on this show as well. I'm very sad about this. I'm very sad about it because again. You go back and you read Bill Carter's Late Shift, the idea that CBS, with David Letterman and his team at the helm, created this unprecedented franchise, 30 plus years ago, and 33 years ago, I guess. And the idea that it wasn't just Dave, that it could be transferred over to somebody, and that somebody could go and be number one in late night for CBS. I don't know. I just, to me, that, and not just me, there are a lot of people who have reached out to me. All three fans of this show reached out to me and are heartbroken. And I'm just, it's a sad thing. It's a sad thing. This is something that we've, it's like, I don't know, it's like your favorite band disbanding. Because the record label has made a change of some sort, and it's just it's hard to quantify for me, especially when you look at all of these other external circumstances. I mean, there are U.S. senators right now that are questioning the timing, and it's just this is one of those things that it's a monumental moment, and I'm grateful for this show, for all the people, the community that we've created, that people that want to talk about this. I'm certain we're going to be talking about it in the weeks to come. Takeaways. Number one, don't blame Conan. I just think we shouldn't blame Conan about this. I don't know. Somehow there's going to be a way to find out about it. And if Jay Leno is behind this, so help me God. Yeah, I hope you enjoy this episode very much. I certainly enjoyed the conversation. Jed is such a great guy, and maybe we can have him or somebody from Late Nighter come on sooner than later, and we can talk about these events that are happening real time right now. But step back 2 weeks before any of this was announced, a couple of weeks ago, and enjoy this fantastic conversation about the founder and the genesis of LateNighter.com. Please enjoy episode 171 of the Letterman Podcast. All right, y'all thought that I might be fibbing. This is proof right now. The Letterman Podcast, we have one sponsor only, but it is Rupert G and the Hello Deli. Thank you very much for sponsoring our show, Rupert.
It's my honor, Mike.
La, 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 la. Welcome once again to the Letterman Podcast. My name is Mike Chisholm. All right, I am very excited about today's guest. I know I get excited about all the guests that come on this show because I love doing this show. I love conversation. I love conversation in the world of David Letterman, of course, David Letterman and Company. And I love the conversation around the culture that it's created and whatnot. Well, today's guest is somebody who's actually furthering that culture of late night as a genre. In fact, I would even say a guardian, kind of keeping it alive. There are so many of us out here who love this genre. I think it's a form of art within an art, and late night is such a cool For me, it's intertwined with my DNA. When my neuroplasticity was at its stickiest, the late night stuff that was happening in this world, of course, Letterman, being the top of the heap of that, but all of it, everything that was happening, back in the day, the happenings of the day, Arsenio Hall, and of course the late night wars, Bill Carter's book, all of that stuff, Larry Sanders Show, all of that stuff. There's so many of us out there who love this stuff and really have, man, a real emotional connection to it. The guy that I have on here not only has that, but he is doing something about it in an unprecedented way. The founder of LateNighter.com, Jed Rosenzweig, is on the show today. And I got to tell you, it is such an honor to have him on here. I've talked about him before last year when I went down to California and came back up again. I went and I visited Jed on the way home. And I talk about that visit a little bit during that episode. And I wanted to be as respectful as possible. I didn't really go into the conversation too much. But, Jed, he has a piece of Letterman's original set from the Ed Sullivan Theater in his living room. And it's so cool to see it. He gave me a piece of the Ed Sullivan Theater floor when I visited him that day. We had just this awesome, easy, simple, such an easy conversation about him and about what he sees with LateNighter.com and what he's doing to gather all of the people who love this thing that we love so much. And you go to latenighter.com. I go there every single day. There's always news on what happened on the late night shows, what's happening behind the scenes, lots of Saturday Night Live stuff, of course, as well. And really, at the end of the day, it's a place for those of us who love this stuff that we can go to. Now, I want to say this. Jed doesn't, I swear to God, he did this for me out of pity. I'll take it. Hey, I'll take pity. I think I've shown very, very much over my time doing this. Oh yeah, I'll take pity. No problem at all. He doesn't do these things. He doesn't do interviews and podcasts and things like that. And yet he has broken through, any trepidation he might have had. And we had a really cool conversation. I wanted to know what brought him to this point. How did he get to the point where he could be the founder of something that I just and so many other people find as such a valuable resource, with latenighter.com. Highly recommend going there, put it in your save list. It's where Bill Carter is writing these days. And I mean, he gave Bill Carter a place to write. Mark Malkoff hosts the Inside Late Night podcast. Jed is doing the Lord's work. Man, I am so grateful for the work that he and his team, all the people who are contributing to the site as writers, as content creators. My gratefulness towards him cannot be understated. We go through his entire career as to what brought him to this point, and it's fascinating. It really is. He got to be front seat, had a front seat, trendsetter for the infancy of the internet and how people would interact when it came to entertainment and things with his start at Yahoo. And we go through all of that. And he is an unabashed Letterman fan. He likes this show, which again is crazy to me, that somebody of his position and who he is, his history and whatnot, would take time to take his very precious time to spend listening or watching this show. And I just appreciate that. And I appreciate everybody who does that, by the way. But the fact that Jed put aside, trepidation and things like that to be on this show here, it means a lot to me. It means the world to me. And I just really, really hope you enjoy my conversation with the founder of latenighter.com, Jed Rosenzweig. Jed, I am really, as you know, I have been really excited to have this conversation with you from the very beginning. I know you probably are a little still baffled by it. but I'm grateful. After our first actual conversation, I realized that in some ways we are brothers from another mother. The first thing I'm going to say to you is thank you so much for preserving this thing that we have this love for, which is late night television, late night programming, the lineage of it, the people, the characters, all of that. I want to thank you so much for that. But the thing that I'm going to say the most, as a Canadian who for decades tried very hard to find places where Bill Carter wrote things, you have given me a source for that. So I want to say thank you for starting latenighter.com and thank you for agreeing to come on the Letterman podcast today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for all that you've done. I actually have you to thank for the fact that Bill is a part of Late Nighter because it was I'm a longtime listener and viewer of your podcast, and when you had him on the first time, I don't remember when exactly that would have been. He at one point mentioned that his CNN contract was coming to a close and that he was looking for a new place to hang his shingle. And I was like, that was my tip off that perhaps we had the opportunity to work with Bill. And from there, Late Nighter was born. So it's all thanks to you. Cheers.
Okay, you and I have had a few conversations, including in person at your house. I don't think you've ever told me that before. If you have, I have blocked it out. Probably some sort of, I don't know, what's the opposite of trauma? Delighted blocking out. That is crazy. I had no idea. I had no idea that was the case. Oh my gosh. Well, yeah.
It's all you, Mike.
Oh my gosh. Every single time I see him, like I go to Late Nighter all the time, of course, and I hope everybody else does. LateNighter.com, optimized for your iPhone, the whole nine yards. Go just, it's such a great site. But every single time I see one of Carter's stories, I just devour it ravenously. And it's just, there's something about that guy. And I thought about it the other day. And don't get me wrong, you got Deggans and some of these other people. Mark Malkoff's Inside Late Night podcast is part of Late Nighter. Please, everybody, go and listen to that as well. But the thing about Carter, and it occurred to me after talking to him when he wrote The Late Shift, The War for Late Night, and his other ones, but he wrote them like they were thrillers. And I think when Bill writes about this thing that we love so much, it's got to be the passion that comes from him. But he writes these things like they're a thriller and they really entrance and get people involved in them, including the stuff he does for you.
I'm so thrilled to have him be a part of Late Night. He's really, he is our North Star, and everything we do, aspires to be as engaging as the stories he writes for us. And that, the enthusiasm and appreciation for Late Night that he exudes from himself whenever he writes, whenever he talks about Late Night. Like, he's first and foremost, like you and I, he is a fan of what this time period has been historically, and the special relationship that viewers have with it just by the very nature of the time that it is aired and the personalities involved.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled to work with him.
Oh man, I can imagine. I want to get into because you alluded to it, the passion that you have for this genre. I want to talk about Saturday Night Live, of course, but I want to set the context a little bit because I didn't realize that I was a fan of something that you were a part of before I knew who you were. High Def Digest, and I know that I want to talk about that a little bit. But before, your foray into the idea of melding entertainment and digital media together, did that start at Yahoo? Is that where things started for you?
I went to art school, studied film. Like, I was really, my parents are both, all three of them, my stepfather as well, visual artists. And so I kind of came to the internet as someone who was really passionate about video and television. And I had always wished that I had come of age in the 50s at a time when TV was still experimental and being developed. And when the internet came around, I had a friend who had started in New York City, an online calendaring company called the WebCal. Bruce Spector was his name. And he, at the time, just to make a living, I was shooting corporate research videos because I had a background in video production. And he said, hey, would you be interested in a part-time job working for this website, essentially doing data entry?
Sure.
And so I started doing that with him, and one of the partners on that site taught me how to code HTML. Raj Chaudhary, lovely man.
Shout out to Raj.
Yes. And I really enjoyed, like, once I had learned HTML, I discovered that you could take any web page online and, rip the source code and kind of create your own version of that. And so I became kind of the front end HTML developer for a portion of the WebCal site called
Yeah.
EventCal. Ultimately, Yahoo came around in 1998 and ended up acquiring that site, WebCal. And I was living in New York, was born and raised in New York, never had any intention of leaving the city. But at that point, I basically, they offered me a job at Yahoo, offered to pay for my relocation with a 1 year commitment. And it seemed like I'd be foolish not to.
Were they in Silicon Valley at the time?
Yeah, they were
Yeah,
out.
so
And
that's a big change for a New Yorker. That's a
it
big
was,
change
yeah,
for
and
a
I
New
really,
Yorker.
I thought it was just going to be a single year, and it ended up being 7 years before all was said and done. And what was fun about joining, so this was '98,
Yep.
Yahoo was still a relatively small company. They were at a place where if you were passionate about a certain subject area and you could kind of prove that you were capable, they'd let you run your own product. And so eventually I found my way to Yahoo Movies and Yahoo TV, where I led our production teams there in building out what were kind of, the little verticals within the larger beast that was Yahoo at the time.
Well, hold
And
on.
it
You
was,
talk about it being a beast. Like I want to set context there. I remember when the internet, the World Wide Web, not Telnet, but the World Wide Web started up, but we were still into the dial-up before DSL and whatnot. And this is before the rise of Google. For the cool
yeah.
kids, Yahoo was the search engine of choice. Yahoo, you talk about a giant, like in those early days of the internet, Yahoo was the go-to. And the idea, it's funny you say I wish I would have grown up in the 50s and I could help roll out some of these things while television was experimental. You kind of got to see that with this genre that you loved in this new medium that was still experimental at the time. You talk about a right place, right time. That is a really neat place in history to kind of put yourself at the forefront of technology during a time of extreme innovation. That, do you ever look back at that and go, wow, you talk about right place, right time. That's where I was. You ever think about that?
I felt it at the time. It was thrilling to be there. It was enjoyed the work. I enjoyed the folks I was working with. We really had a front row seat to that stage of the internet. There would be folks like Madeleine Albright when she was Secretary of State visiting, and that's just the first random person that comes to mind. But it
Mm-hmm.
was the center of the internet universe for a time. And it was, what was fun about working for a company like that at that time was, this wasn't something that the folks who worked there studied to do. There was no such thing as the World Wide Web as we now know it, when most folks were in high school or college going in there. And so we came from all kinds of different backgrounds. And it was a thrilling time and space to be in the Valley. And again, like I never imagined living outside of New York. And then, by the time those 7 years were up, I could not believe that I'd had that experience.
Yeah,
And so I was up I was living in San Francisco and commuting down to Silicon Valley
yep.
for the 5 years. And then we moved down to Los Angeles because I was working for Yahoo Entertainment, and we moved our operations down to Santa Monica. Which is where I met my wife, and we ended up in Seattle and now Portland. But I've forgotten your question.
No, you answered it, and a couple other ones as well that I now don't have to ask, which is great. When you're down there, now you obviously love all of these mediums that you talk about, television and all that. We didn't even talk about prime time, or we will, but you love these mediums still. You're a late night fan. You love the things that the dozens of people who listen to this show love. All of these things, the ins and outs and all of that. And yet you have this job coding technology. And now you find these two things that you have that are melding, and you're actually in Los Angeles, kind of the epicenter, one of the epicenters of show business. Did it get fun at that point? Did you get a chance to start, like, was there bucket list stuff that was kind of coming true without even you trying to, just by doing the work? Was that a part of your job?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it was, first of all, it was fun throughout, but there were, again, this has everything to do with the power of Yahoo at the time. But, an example, at one point, I think you may remember that William Shatner had a deal with Priceline where he was their spokesperson, and I think in exchange, like he owned a piece of Priceline in exchange for this a relationship that he had with them, and Marlon Brando heard about this and decided that he wanted to do the same thing. And so he called Yahoo, like called the switchboard and said, "Yeah, I want to talk to Jerry Yang, who was the co-founder of Yahoo and went on to be the company's CEO at one point after I'd
Hmm.
left. He was a face of Yahoo." And Jerry then passed him, probably didn't believe that it was Marlon Brando, but for whatever reason, because I was in charge of production for movies and TV at Yahoo, it was decided that I was the one who would talk with Marlon Brando. And so I, had a series of phone conversations with Brando, not entirely believing that it was him, while feeling like someone was punking me. But then went down to this is when I was still up in the valley.
Yeah.
Went down and met him on one occasion down at his home in Beverly Hills. That's certainly whether it's a bucket list or it's not the type of thing I ever imagined that I would be doing.
Godfather on two. Yeah, yeah. You don't expect to get that call.
Yeah, and that really, like that was the very tip of the iceberg when
Yeah.
it came to the unique opportunities that came my way just by association with Yahoo at that time.
So that's incredible. And I'm certain that if you did take a journal or were a journaler at that point, some of the things that you experienced are just mind numbing. Now, at the same time, I know a lot of people in tech. My wife actually has a tech startup, and I understand how things go. A lot of people sometimes have things off the side of their desk. Was High Def Digest one of those things that was running off the side of your desk, or did you end your association with Yahoo before you started that?
I did end my association with Yahoo. We had done some stuff at Yahoo. Like we knew that there was, so this was 2005,
Yep.
2006, when DVDs were where an awful lot of money was being made in distributing DVDs. And the movie studios were looking for places to advertise their wares. And at Yahoo, we never really cracked that nut. We tried Yahoo Movies at the time was the most trafficked movies site on the web, and we
Yep.
tried to put out a section for DVDs. And I think the reality is that by the time movies hit DVD, you've kind of heard all you would need to know about a film, and so there was never really a kind of editorial way in for us from a
Right.
movie's perspective. But my wife's a doctor, and we were moving up to Seattle, and Yahoo by then had become a different type of company, much larger, certainly much more corporate
I was going to say corporate.
environment.
Yep.
And so I was looking for the next thing, and I had met a gentleman through my work at Yahoo named Peter Brackey, who knew all there was to know about DVDs. I was fortunate enough, having worked at Yahoo at the right time, to be able to just at that point consider what do I want to do as my next big thing. Really, what I wanted to do was to work with people who I admired and try and craft, kind of greenhouse some web ideas that would hopefully become self-sustaining. Like what I really enjoyed doing at Yahoo was building new sections of our product.
Yep.
And so to this day, like I really enjoy starting from scratch, trying to identify a subject area and building something that hopefully, there's a business model there, and the project itself can at some point kind of, cook on its own fumes, to mix my metaphors. But I thought there was an opportunity to work with Peter. He was interested. He collaborated first to build a site that was expressly about DVDs. Then as high def, it was just around the time that the HD DVD and Blu-ray
Yep.
format wars were emerging, and there seemed to be a lot of interest, a lot happening in that space. So we transitioned. We launched High Def Digest in, I think it was April of 2006. And it quickly, like it just became, by stroke of luck, it became the place where folks who were passionate about the emerging formats started to gather It was both a content site and a community, and it ended up growing very rapidly. And ultimately, within I think about 2.5 years later, my wife was pregnant. We were kind of looking at the next chapter of our lives, and somebody else had expressed interest in acquiring the site. And so I was able to, just hand it off to them. And I'm thrilled that it continues to this day.
I was one of the people, by the way. So again, to provide
You acquired
context,
the site?
not the acquiring the site. No, the other part, person who enjoyed being into the site. And I do believe actually I was part of the community at one point back in the day. Again, to provide context. I mean, you think about with Yahoo, okay, it's the culture, and the culture is movies and things like that. Well, with High Def Digest, that's when you kind of start delving into a very large subculture within that larger culture. And I was certainly a part of it. I will not let, anytime we do any sort of downsizing in the house, I have gotten my DVD/Blu-ray collection down to a level where I will never let any of them go, because they're the ones that have the special gems, that commentary that you will never find anywhere else. And back then, you think about, I'm the kid who bought, there are records of things that I bought on vinyl, moved to cassette, moved to CD, and then moved to digital, and they have gotten me every single time it translates to movies. I don't know how many copies of the Star Wars trilogy I've ended up buying over the years. The same content, but just different, right? And so when a new version of one of these things that I love so much, whichever one it might have been, whether it was a Quentin Tarantino movie or a Kevin Smith movie or whatever, or you'd see the first time DVD release of a movie, you're like, okay, is this the one I'm going to buy? Or in 6 months, are they going to release the one that I really want to buy? And that was a lot of stuff to sift through. And me and all of my friends on Tuesday, the first place we were going was the media shop, whatever our local media shop was. Tuesdays were a big deal for us, and we wanted to know what was coming out on Tuesday. High Def Digest gave us that edge, and it let us know these things, and it went into the behind the scenes of some of these special editions that would come out. And it was an incredibly valuable site. Like, I can't tell you how much I loved that site, and knowing the pieces of information you guys would go and mine and find for us. I gotta ask you though, Jed, like, it's so interesting. One of the things, when I've talked to a lot of creatives in my life for this show as well, of course, and the nut that is hard to crack is the idea of someone being a creative, but then trying to monetize or to put commerce and connect the creativity with commerce. You seem to kind of had a knack to being able to do that. Is that something you've ever thought of? Because you are a creative, like you have these roots, visual artistry and things like that, and you certainly love these arts that come out, whatever format they might come out in or media they might come out in. But you also have this business sense as well. Has that always been the case, or have you just been really, really lucky with the timing, or is it a combination of both?
I think really, really lucky with the timing.
Yeah.
I enjoy having a problem to solve. And so, with High Def Digest, at the time, online ad revenue was not really enough to sustain a site like that.
Yep.
And so, we did some experimenting, and because we became a de facto, just
The go-to.
one of the primary sources for
Absolutely.
information about Blu-ray and HDVD discs, and people who were, we became, because we were announcing, when discs would be released, we became the window through which folks were pre-ordering discs on Amazon. And at that time, Amazon had an associates program where you would get a substantial piece of every sale if you refer the consumer to them. So it became a much more profitable business than I had ever envisioned, thanks to Amazon.
Yeah. And just the way the winds were blowing, you just happened to be,
And
built your sail right at the time the storm was about to come.
Right. Yeah. And so it was, it was not a stroke of genius. It was recognizing, okay, I'm not able to make this site self-sustaining by advertising revenue alone. And so what else can we do? And, we threw a lot of different things at the wall, but that ended up, luckily for us, being the thing that stuck.
Yeah, well, it was a really good one, and I'm grateful to it to this day. When I first learned about Late Nighter, and I wanted to, okay, who started this? And I looked back and I saw you were associated with that. I was just like, son of a bitch. Okay, that's very cool that was the case. Now, okay, so High Def goes away, how long had you been thinking about this idea of curating, again, subculture?
So I took about 10 years off while we were raising our young children and then came back to the web around 2016,
Hmm?
2017. And my return back to the, like, kind of similar to what I was describing with High Def Digest. There was another fellow whose work I was just a huge fan of. His name is Norman Weiss, and he had a website called tvtattle.com
Yep.
that existed as a standalone website going back to, I think, the year 2000. And, I think at one point he was able to make ends meet just through online advertising. Then that bubble burst, and he started essentially writing TV Tattle as a column for a couple of other outlets. First Hitflix, then I think TV Insider. And through the time I worked at Yahoo and beyond, I was obsessed with his column. I would voraciously read it every day over lunch. And he, around that time, had stepped away from his column at TV Insider, and I was really missing it. And so I approached him and said, "Hey, don't
I'll give
worry
you a
about."
platform. I'll give you a
Yeah, I'll
platform. Is
give
that
you
what
a
you said to him?
platform.
Oh my
Don't
God.
worry about it being a business so much. We'll figure that part out. And so we relaunched together tvtattle.com, which then kind of in a roundabout kind of way led to the birth of Late Nighter.
Yeah.
It was, so just to back up here a little bit, TV
Sure.
Tattle is this highly curated kind of global view across the web of what critics and columnists, folks who write about TV, are saying on a daily basis. It's your one-stop shop for kind of the best, most critical takes on the state of television on any given day. And that's how I was introduced to most of the folks who contribute to our sites today, because they were writing elsewhere. And at one time, every local paper in the country had a TV columnist who was pumping out content on a daily basis that was often really compelling and was not reaching folks beyond their, specific region. TV Tattle, especially in the early days, was a place where you could really get this global view. He continues today. If The White Lotus has just aired its finale, he's going to give you an overview of what, the 15 top critics across the country had to say about it.
Very handy.
And I think that everybody's writing about television these days, whether it's Newsweek, whether it's the New York Times, especially, at that juncture, which was kind of like the peak of peak TV. It
Yep.
was just any entertainment writer, any outlet that was trying to game Google's algorithm was tapping into that. But then I've had a personal passion for late night television for as long as I've been allowed to watch television, which was going back to when I had parents who did not allow me as a child to watch TV. So I
Gotcha.
basically was introduced to television at the age of about 13.
Yep.
And gravitated to late night, first through Saturday Night Live, then through to Letterman. And like, to me, it was where the most interesting stuff was happening on television, and still is to a large extent.
I couldn't agree more. I just got to ask with the SNL, and I want to talk to you a lot about SNL because I know how much you enjoy it, and then there's also the generational aspect of it that I want to get to here in a moment. But who was your cast? Was it the original cast, or was it like who was your cast that you were introduced to SNL to?
So I was introduced. My first SNLs were during the Dick Ebersol years.
Oh, okay.
Eddie Murphy, Joe Piscopo,
Yep.
that whole crew. Like, I started watching around 1984,
Yep.
and then living in New York, had the great fortune of being able to go on standby and actually go to quite a few tapings over
So
the
one of my
course of
questions is, how many do you
years.
think you went to?
At least, I would say maybe 15 over the course of, like, 15 to 20 over the
Yep.
course of about 3 years.
Yep.
It was, kind of brutal, although less brutal than I believe it is today. But you would get there around 3 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday morning. You'd wait in line in the lobby of Rockefeller Center for 6 hours. They'd hand out the stand, buy tickets. You'd come back later that night and hope that you get in. And because I was going at an era where I would say kind of the heart of the period where my friends and I were going to the show on a semi-weekly basis
Yep.
was kind of 86 through 87,
Yep.
which is just after Lorne Michaels had come back to the show and the now famous Weird Year
Yeah.
was not a particularly securing tickets on standby was not all that hard during that period.
But you watch
So,
that change though, as Carvey and Hartman and Hooks and like they all just started to really expand the thing again. And within a few years, Wayne's World's making a couple $100 million at the box office. Again, it's not that long from when you were doing that. So you saw the show go. We talk about ebbs and flows. My goodness, you've seen a lot of different ebbs and flows in your career in all sorts of different areas. And SNL certainly is one of them when you got your entry point. But at the same time, when you're that age at that time, you don't know it's the weird year. You don't know that Michaels has come back or whatnot. And yet still, it feels like you going there. You wouldn't have gone more than once if there wasn't that magic, that whimsy, and it feels like your glue was still sticky at that point, and it just sort of solidified into your subconscious core memories. Is that accurate?
yeah, I mean, there's no more exciting show to see produced than SNL, and that was, I would, I can't express how thrilling it was as a kid who was, obsessed with the show to be able to see it in real time every week and to, engage, with cast members and, such a different time. But, to be able to, sneak up there when we were waiting in line early in the morning on a Saturday morning, folks would let us in and we could, just wander around the studio. It was an extraordinary experience for a 14, 15, 16-year-old kid, which is what I was at the time.
Absolutely. Did you see, were they all shows or were some of them dress rehearsals or combination?
We did a mix of both. Like we got to a point where we were so diehard that we would go to both.
That was an option for you that you could actually get to both?
You could get 2 tickets. Each person in line at that time could get 2 tickets. And so if you and a friend went in and one got, 2 dress rehearsal tickets and one got 2 live show tickets, you could split it.
Oh my gosh. And knowing, okay, so one of the areas I think our brains are similar on a night that you could see both at once, the fascination as to see which sketches got cut from dress and getting out at whatever time the 1:30, say it's 1:30, whatever time it is that you get out onto the streets of 30 Rock, and you're trying to go back and forth on which ones were in the dress. Okay. Oh yeah, what that would happen in the dress and this one didn't have, like there was a lot of that, right?
For sure. Yeah. 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 I mean, there are sketches that get cut. There are lines that get changed.
Yeah.
It was, yeah, and it feels like that at that time, these were not things that folks were tracking. There weren't Reddit groups and for that matter, Wall Street Journal, writers who were covering this kind of stuff. It existed within that world and within that world alone. So it was great fun to bear witness.
Yeah, you think about I think about bands that I love and before the internet, whenever I would have a band that I loved and somebody would slip me a bootleg of one of their shows somewhere. And it's like, okay, this is the little dialogue they had with the audience in between this song and that song. And I saw them in concert with the same set list, but this one here was special because of this one event that happened because someone threw a shoe on the stage or whatever it was. It's kind of a little bit like that. Like there's this, it's not going to be known otherwise. Now it seems that everything gets known, gets put out there and it's, but the cutting room floor stuff, the process of it for people like myself, and I think you as well, the process is equally as fascinating. I got to see Kimmel a couple days before I came and met you, just over a year ago. I got to see Kimmel, and not only did I enjoyed the show, of course, but I I looked more into what was happening. At one point, he was interviewing Chris Pine, and I was looking more at the things that were going on around it and more fascinated by that. I imagine there was a lot of that for yourself and for that group of friends that you were with.
Oh yeah, there was again, there's nothing more thrilling than seeing that show come together. And I've again living in New York and being really into this stuff. I went to a lot of Letterman tapings, and I saw the Cosby Show, and Kate Nally, which was produced out of the Ed Sullivan Theater,
Yep.
and none of them were as thrilling as SNL. Yet it was always I had and have a kind of unending fascination with what it takes to make television.
Yeah. What's were some of the early Letterman stuff? Because I mean, again, I don't mean to have buried the lead, but I'm so fascinated as to what has brought you to have founding Late Nighter. But that being said, when I came over to your house, we talked a lot about Letterman. Like you are a Letterman fan, and I'm curious. You got to see some of that late night stuff. I mean, my word. Any core memories that pop out of late night memories from back in the time that you got to see live and in person?
I would say I did not really go to see, I did see a couple of Late Night with David Letterman tapings,
Yep.
but it was not until he moved to CBS and I was in my 20s
Yep.
where I probably went to a half a dozen tapings over the first couple of years that he was at CBS, because there was a period of time where it just seemed like it was relatively easy to write in for tickets.
Which is crazy because it was the peak. It was the peak
Yes.
of Dave was everywhere. That story was again late shift. This is the late right around the late shift time is
Yep.
what you're talking about, and crazy stuff that you got to see.
And it was just such a, it was the center. It was thrilling as a Letterman fan because he was at the center of the entertainment universe,
Yep.
and it was such a big show. I think he's described it as a, a circus that was just so heightened. Yet Dave was still Dave. Like I would say that the the core memories that I have of Letterman was have to do with his influence on me as a awkward teenager
Yep.
who saw in him someone who had the ability, who seemed in a world that was so superficial, appeared to be genuine, was having fun with television in a way that other people weren't, that didn't, that there's so much of TV that just feels like it's folks coloring by numbers, right? And
Yep.
and he was really, he and his team were doing really innovative things. And as a teenager, that was super exciting. Like, SNL was kind of my gateway drug. And then Letterman became kind of the person from which, and I think this is true of a lot of people of my generation, from which I, like 20-30% of my personality is just Daveisms.
Yeah. Mine too.
It's, uh, and so it was for the longest time, Late Night with David Letterman felt like it was this thing that existed in, for those of us who happened to be up at 12:30 or who were taping it and watching it at, 6 in the morning, which is what I was doing. And then, I kind of fell out of, I went to college and fell out of it for a bit. And then, I graduated from college in May of 93 and moved back to the city. So I was there, in September of 1993 for, that first stretch of shows. And it felt like, that this thing that had been my little secret all of a sudden, was the biggest thing in entertainment, and it was super thrilling
That way too. And it's funny. This analogy has been used a few times on the show here, but the idea it's when you love that band and you see them in the garage, and then you see them in maybe the local armory or whatever it is, and you're like, man, this is really special. This is really special. And then suddenly they're stadium touring and they've blown up. And there's a percentage of that audience that goes into the, that Gen X, oh, you're a sellout kind of a thing. And then there's a percentage of the audience that's like, wow, I can't believe it's become become this, and what felt like a secret club is now everybody is either in on it or has heard about it at least, right? And that's a thrilling feeling for me. I love that as well. But you go back to those times where it was, there's a couple of guys that I went to junior high with, and we would walk by each other in the hallway the next morning after a Letterman, and we weren't even really in the same friend group, but we both knew that we liked Letterman, and we just do this little, like, if something funny on the show happened the night before, something where there was spontaneous things went off the rails, whatever it was, a special moment, and we just kind of look at each other and do the little nod. Yeah, that was great, right? And just kept walking. That was always that. Letterman very much had that, and for those who saw it explode like that, the explosion was that much more spectacular, and you were there for it. You were in New York for it. I talked to Rupert. If there are stories that I get Rupert to tell me, it's of those first few years. It's just because think about from his perspective, right? He's got this little sandwich shop that may or may not make it, and suddenly, like you say, the circus comes to town and moves in right next door, and everything changes forever. A magical, magical time. And obviously it stayed with you. Now let's fast forward. We're at to the point here where I want to talk about Late Nighter. I want to talk about your boy, because at the end of the day, I love the idea that part of this spawned from, yes, life experience. Yes, where as you say in Canada, you're not where the puck is. You see where the puck is going a little bit. You have this love for these things. You've got a bond of SNL with your son, which I thought was just fantastic. Obsessed? Is he obsessed with SNL? He loves SNL the way that you did, or more so?
I don't want to, he is very into Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
And we started watching together a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. And yeah, he got very into it, and he had long been suggesting to me that there should be a late night version. And so it really, it came from him and his passion for Saturday Night Live, and obviously our shared passion. It's been fun to, I now live in Portland, Oregon, mm-hmm. and we don't have the ability to go and see the show in person, and yet, there are so many avenues through which to kind of get a peek behind the scenes. And that is from whence Late Nighter came. And, so he's into SNL. He's become really into all of the late night talk shows as well. And it has been fun to produce a website that is as much for me, a, 53-year-old who is, nostalgic in some ways for the late night of old, but to also be programming to not that there are a lot of 14-year-old kids who are really into this stuff.
Yep.
But to know that there are, to be looking at it through his eyes is great fun.
Absolutely. I mean, my granddaughter is my life. She's my everything. We spend, I see her 5 days a week, and I'm already at the point, she's just turned 7, and I'm already at the point where I'm showing her very specific Letterman videos that are, as far as I'm concerned, for a 7-year-old, low-hanging fruit stuff that will make her scream with laughter, because she knows the Letterman she knows a little bit about it. She knows David Letterman's name very well, because the name gets thrown around in my circles all the time. But I'll show her some of these videos.
You wear, no?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But still watch some of these clips and to hear her laugh at it. I mean, I hope beyond hope that there is some way that I can share that connection with her in some way, shape, or form, even if it's her liking the new version of whatever late night is going to move into. If that ends up being what it is, okay, fine. But you actually got the connection with the same show that you love and whatnot. And what a cool bonding to have with a kid or a family member. That is a beautiful, beautiful thing. That is certainly not a given that is going to happen. There's 5 or 6 things that my dad wish I would have gravitated into and I didn't end up, so that is really cool that you two can bond towards that. I was going to ask, before you started Late Nighter, had you crossed paths with Mark Malkoff before?
Yeah, I was a big fan of the Carson podcast.
Right. Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I was a Patreon supporter of his, and we had a few conversations about when he was wrapping up the Carson podcast doing something else. And, Late Nighter is very much, another opportunity for me to work with folks whose work I admire, hopefully, having a single place where one can find both Bill Carter and Mark Malkoff and others who have expertise and passion for this space kind of lifts us all up. So that Mark is really, I would put him up there with Bill Carter as one of the leading voices thinking about late night and writing about late night in his new book.
Yep.
And uh, uh, he has the ability, much like you do in podcast form, to translate his own personal enthusiasm for the time period into really compelling content.
I appreciate that. Everybody, if you want to don't get me wrong, this is this is a podcast. It is. If you want to listen to a really, really awesome podcast, listen to Inside Late Night with Mark Malkoff. It is so good. And then, like you said, I thank you for referencing that. We've talked about it lots on the show, but the Carson podcast. And I mean, by the way, for those who are Letterman aficionados or ones who want to be, there's a lot of crossover in the Carson podcast as well into the Letterman world. A lot of folks who have been on this show have also done episodes on the Carson podcast back in the day. When Mark wrapped up, I believe he wrapped up in March of 22, and we started in April of 22. It was cross-sectioned very, very well, and he was on Jay Ryan's show, and then Mark we connected at that point. He ended up being one of the early guests on our show. As far as I'm concerned, he's a guy that gave our show credibility. So if you want to blame somebody, blame Mark. But Mark Malkoff is a phenomenal guy. He's a guy who tries to, he's an encourager. And that's one of the things I love about Mark so much. I'm one of the big believers. I believe collaboration kicks the crap out of competition. I really, really do. And he's a collaborator. He's a guy that says, yeah, go do this. Here, have you talked to this person? Have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? He's really a special guy. And I'm again grateful that you have provided a place for him to have an outlet. And again, like Bill Carter, it's such a cool thing. You also did it at a time where it was moving right into the SNL 50. Now we're kind of looking back on it. You and I talked about it when I saw you this time last year, wondering a few things or whatever. Boy, did NBC in this current time, place, the landscape of entertainment, how everything is shifting from the Olympics to the end of SNL 50, as far as I'm concerned, that network hit a grand slam home run with the documentaries that came out around SNL, the build up, including how they finished the season. I thought they did an absolutely spectacular job of executing a landmark event while everything is shifting the way that it is. Would you? I'm certain you agree with that.
I do. Yeah. I mean, they eventized the anniversary, and from what I understand, this is their model. They're going to be doing the same thing next winter with the Olympics and the Super Bowl, which will also happen to be on NBC. And, it went beyond, they managed to stretch it out over the course of the entire season for Saturday Night Live. I know that it was, everybody is sounding the death knell for broadcast television, but it was, they managed to draw huge audiences for the anniversary show. Season itself, I think, is up. I know is up year over year by, I think, 30%. That's unheard of where broadcast television is now. It was the most profitable SNL season of all time, which, when you consider the state of broadcast television today, it was really well played and well executed. It was that anniversary special, the homecoming special. I'm biased. I love the show,
Sure.
But I can't imagine either being better produced. It was just they had the all-stars working on these things, and it showed.
Yep.
The sheer talent on display was extraordinary.
Yeah, the documentaries, the people who did the documentaries were all, again, the best of the best of the best, and it did show. That's right. But the idea of, and it's going to be interesting. This is one of the questions I wanted to ask you about the business of late night. I'm glad we did this. I'm glad we got the intro out of the way, and trust me, it's gone fantastic as far as I'm concerned. I'm so grateful, and I love this conversation, Jed.
It's kind of you to say. I don't think anybody else is listening at this point.
I do not care. That's fine. That is fine with me. It can be a show for one, and I'm down. I love it. But here's the business part of late night. Now, I've talked to Carter the idea of I think the last time maybe he came on, we talked about the idea of the appointment, and the appointment television still works, whether it's the Super Bowl, whether it's the Oscars, whether it's and in a way, late night can be that. The monologue recaps that you guys do and things like that. I do believe that the time and place of, Big Orange, as I like to call him down south, when Big Orange does something, I want to know what the guys and gals on late night want to say about it, right? And what their take is, and where the writers come up with the angle to go and skewer, whatever it is that's happening out there. So in a small way, it's the monologue. Then there's also, of course, still the machine of we are. I mean, even Letterman, for that matter, was involved with promotion, because the lion's share of the A-lister that gets people to maybe who aren't diehard fans to tune in is going to be that appointment of Tom Cruise just came back on Letterman for the first time in 7 years, things like that, right? So there's always been these little appointment things that have been part of late night. SNL then went and took it a step further, and they created partnerships with brands and had advertising, and the cast members would be part of, the Volkswagen commercials with the Californians and many others. It was very, very well, it was very, very meticulously triggered and went up. You think about this with late night, folks.
Yeah.
Do you have to go? Do you have to do something?
No, the dog just wanted
Oh, good. Okay. So you think about this with late night shows, and Dave, I don't think ever would have done this, but I wonder if to solidify late night, if that's what it's going to need to be, are we going to need to see Seth doing commercials in between the guests and things like that for things almost like a throwback to when television first started, where it was very specific advertising for specific products in one show. It's interesting how SNL incorporated some of the old to make this stuff happen. And I wonder if it is going to be a playbook to keep late night alive moving forward.
It very well may be. Obviously, it was really successful for SNL. And there's, I think late night has traditionally been a time period where folks innovate, right?
Yeah.
Some of the most interesting kind of out of the box programming ideas have come out of late night. So it only flows that, as the business itself struggles to adjust to the shift, that they would begin to experiment there. And you're certainly seeing, Fallon and Seth Meyers as well. They're all doing what we call on our site, I think they call them brand activations. We call them sponsored content. Colbert has done some of it himself.
Absolutely.
But it's it's the type of thing that you get the sense that Letterman and Carson, would never deign to do. Yet I feel like each of these guys are doing it in their own voice and in a way that feels organic to their shows. And, there's a model there, whether it can backfill for the millions of viewers who are no longer watching on broadcast. I think we're seeing that no, it can't, but it's some of the more, it is something that we cover on Late Nighter, because I think it's some of the most creative stuff that's happening in late night today.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And it is going to be very interesting to see how things adjust even more. And if things are scaling back, when that scaling stops, because, the whole thing about late night back in the day was you compare late night to a show like, say, I don't know, I pulled LA Law. I don't know why I pulled LA Law, but I'm pulling LA Law. So LA Law is on TV and it costs X amount of dollars to produce. Well, a late night show that doesn't just have, at the time, probably 25 episodes, I guess, of LA Law, 25 episodes, they have way more, and it's yet still way less from a cost to produce. But now we're seeing things scaling back, where late night shows, which were the cheap shows to produce, now, you're seeing Seth lose his band. You're seeing After Midnight going away, and the Byron Allen thing, that's actually very frustrating, very interesting, I should say, as to what's happening there. I was very saddened about that, obviously, because Dave is the one that opened up the 12:30 time slot to another late night show on CBS, and the expansion that's happened now, as the expansion kind of contracts a little bit, it's interesting to see where that's going to stop and what causes that to stop. And if there is, like you say, a problem-solving ability from somebody who can come in and say, I'm going to figure out another income stream for these shows, what it could look like, what that might entail. Very, very interesting time to be observing this stuff. Obviously, there still is an audience for this stuff, which is why you guys are doing what you're doing. I want to ask about, are there things that you would see for late night, or I saw as you guys got going, we talked about before the show, about a year and a half ago, I guess is how long you've been in play at the time of this episode, right? About a year and a half?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there anything that you are, do you have any white whales when it comes to late night? Or is there something that you can talk about? It's like, yes, I would really like to see us do this or have this, a different section. Are there things that are expanding that it's moving into that you can see that it's going to expand, evolve into, I should say?
The model for late nighter in many ways is this site TV Newser that was started by Brian Stelter, who's gone on to I think he's back at CNN, but it was a very kind of industry focused site, still is, on the business of television news. And I was a big fan of that site, still am. What they do uniquely is they work closely with the TV news networks, whether they're on cable or, NBC News, CBS News, ABC News. And they've kind of become a more of an insider view of what's happening in that industry. They do a lot of, how the sausage is made kind of stuff. And that was always my hope and vision for where Late Nighter would go, where we would develop, relationships with the shows where they would peel back the curtain and share with us the kind of stuff that you often see around FYC Emmy consideration time, where we talk about why the show chose to do this, what goes into producing one of these sponsored content pieces. And that has been, it's been difficult for us to get there with the PR departments that manage the late night.
That's
show.
where it stops, is the PR departments. I've got a few guests who have told me they're coming on the show, and I get stopped at their PR person for whatever reason. That really is a wall sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a real struggle. So you can speak with folks, and we know that folks who work on the shows are, reading the site, are, fans of the site. And we too have had that experience where, they want to talk, and then we talk with the PR rep and they're like, no, we're not, one of the network's PR reps says, we don't look behind the curtain. And that, I hope that moving forward, because we really, we are champions for late night. We want to see more late night. We think that it's a really special time period. We think that there are so many great stories to be told. And yet, for the most part, we're limited to observational stuff when it comes to present day late night.
Right.
We can do the how the sausage is made pieces for things that happened in the past with folks who are no longer working for a given show. But I think that there's, as a consumer of this type of journalism, I personally would love to read these stories. And I think that there's an opportunity for the shows to benefit there as well. So I would love to see more of that type of stuff on our there are any number of directions that, depending on which day you get me, I'd love to see us doing more video content. I would love to be, doing more programming for social media. We've got a partnership with the Saturday Night Network, which is another podcast that is in deep with SNL and led by John Schneider, who is their on-air host and the founder of their operation.
And not one of the Dukes of Hazzard.
Not that John Schneider. This one, no age for our Canadian John Schneider as well, actually. But they've really managed to build a community around SNL fandom. And I would love to be able to mirror that for late night writ large.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Like, building the community, I think is of course, the part when you were talking about as the rise of all the things that you built in the past. Obviously, one of the X factors that threw the monkey into the monkey wrench into the machine was with social media and the idea that, if you get a robust social media following, whatever platform whether it's contained within yours or running alongside in another platform, you have that. Obviously, that is a huge momentum gainer for you. Just to go back to what you were saying about to me, it's short-sighted that these PR departments, but ultimately their bosses, the ones who say, yeah, no, we're not going to pull back the curtain of the current day shows. Again, are they problem solvers that are looking for a solution to the ever-changing landscape? To me, that is a silver bullet potential right there. Is you, if you can get that, again, that subculture that wants to go behind the scenes, that wants to know what the deleted scenes are, the stuff that ends up on the cutting room floor, the things that the part where the process excites them, you ignite that group. That is your most passionate group of enthusiasts or fans. To me, that is very short-sighted. Just to go back to that point that you were talking about, like, gosh, you guys could be a tool to help keep this thing alive if done right. You could have departments in late nighter that are relational departments for every late night show that's out there. But you see that. Of course, I'm preaching to the choir when it comes to that, and I'm certain that there are times where you're pulling your hair out in frustration to that.
It can be frustrating, but it's also, I think that, it breeds creativity, right? Like we need to find other ways in, and there are, I've been gratified that there are shows like Have I Got News for You, which is on CNN. They've been really cooperative with us. We've done some really interesting things with them. There are some pathways happening, and we're still a relatively young site. I also get there's so many outlets out there, and I get that the PR departments and the shows themselves are holding on to as much control as they can.
Yeah. I get that.
It is what it is.
To shift a little bit, part of this timing wave thing that you seem to have done well a couple of times, and I feel like there's a potential to do it again, is the idea of streamers getting involved, trying to crack the code of what late night could be for them. I personally, and I'll say this, there are people who have reached out to me in private and they completely disagree with me. I love Everybody's Live. Like, I think Everybody's Live is fantastic. People are like, oh, there's these awkward moments. Yeah. I know. I love every single one of them. Every second that goes by, that awkwardness is there. I absolutely adore it. I think it's fantastic. You guys have considered Everybody's Live a late night show, which I'm so grateful for. That's great that you guys give them some coverage. I think what they're doing there is spectacular. The streamers cracking the code could be the next thing because, you look at the numbers that they're getting. I love the way Nielsen's reporting things now, and it's interesting to see, what Andor's numbers have been, or Handmaid's Tale, or some of these things that are out there, as that's sort of taking over and becoming what the mainstream really actually is. It's the actual mainstream versus the traditional, whatever you want to call it. I don't know if I have the right vocabulary for that, but I think you understand where I'm coming from. I feel like this genre that we love so much still has so much potential to make a mega splash where the eyeballs are. Curious if you agree with that, and then also just your take on Everybody's Live. I'm glad you guys on late night are considering that a late night show.
Yeah, well, it airs at 10 p.m. on the East Coast.
In the East, yeah, that's true.
And it's obviously it may be a funhouse mirror, but it is it certainly resembles a late night show. I mean, I think that the streamers have had a difficult time. They've tried many times to do late night styled shows, and it has not really caught on. And whether or not, I think Everybody's Live has certainly got the kind of chattering class talking, and I think that's in part a function of just Mulaney himself, who I think is brilliant. Yep. But I also think it's because the show is innovating on the model. I think it's that I've heard Mulaney, and we've covered this as well. Their approach is, yes, they produce a live show on Wednesday nights, but they're also producing a show that exists in the Netflix catalog, and they're thinking about that for viewing at any point in the future. Yeah. And they're thinking about that as they produce the show. I think that the fact that it was aired live gives it a vitality that I wish that some of the, I do think that one of the great advantages that the broadcast networks have, and Bill has written about this really eloquently, is the fact that people tend to watch these shows in real time or close to it versus the streamers, where you don't quite know when you don't have that mass of people watching at literally the same time, unless they themselves are doing live programming, which they're doing. And so, we would love to see the network shows going live. I think that there's a real opportunity there. I realize it's a lifestyle choice, right? Like,
Oh, 100%.
yeah, I think everybody's life has been manna from heaven for those of us who are passionate about, who come at late night from a kind of Letterman-esque background where you're, nothing sacrosanct. If something's not working, we're going to acknowledge it and try and make that the entertainment. I think that there's so much of, I was talking to someone not so long ago about when you used to watch Letterman or Carson, there were jokes that would fall flat and that would become the joke. I think that, having my son and I went to New York and attended every late night show that's in production there last summer.
Yeah.
And they hype up their audiences so much that if a joke falls flat, you wouldn't know it from watching the show. And it all feels very transactional, at least when it comes to the monologues. And, I think there's a comfort in that as a viewer, right? You don't have to think about, was that funny or not? It's programmed for you. And if people are laughing, it just feels like the role is being played out. But it was really refreshing to have a show like Everybody's Live that felt like, not only was it living in the moment in that it was airing live, but this was not a passive experience in any way for the people involved, for viewers. It was really exciting, and I hope it's coming back.
Yeah, I hope it is too. I'm curious about it because, like, my wife and I have watched it a couple of times, and the reason my wife watches it, she loves John Mulaney, like loves him, right? So I'm like, I'm going to watch this, and I pop it on. I've not watched any of them live, including the Letterman episode. The Letterman episode was when I was closest to watching it live. I was an hour and a half after it finished, but I've watched them all, and every single time that I have watched them, and the phone line comes up and it says, of course, recorded an earlier time or whatever the disclaimer is. Every single time that's happened, I'm like, oh, I would have called. I wanted to call in. I wanted to. I want to watch it live. Like I really do want to. However, I've enjoyed every single episode, not having watched one of them live. And
Right.
I think you're exactly right. It does feel more organic. I used to love sitcoms, and don't get me wrong, even Big Bang Theory and things like that, the traditional sitcoms that in the modern age have How I Met Your Mother, that have in the modern age kind of still worked. I did feel like there were times where if you could see clips of the sitcom and then the audience was taken out of it, would I be laughing? Probably not once. And it becomes this plastic sort of manufactured machine-like process that Letterman really never felt like. And that's one of the with Letterman, one of the things that I am trying to figure out with the lens that I now have on is looking at the moments that seemed spontaneous but were not, and vice versa. They mastered that. That was one of the things they mastered. I've talked to a bunch of the segment producers will not come on this show because they know that one of the questions I will ask are, what are lines have you swept, over to the guest that comes out? Many times the guest comes out and sits down on Dave's set, and Dave asks a question or whatever, and the person says something, and then Dave, spikes back, or vice versa. Dave will say something, and that person will make a joke, and well, that of course is a line that was fed to them by a segment producer who could have been a writer, some who did become writers, and that was cool, but it seemed spontaneous at the time, which goes back to what you were talking about, how the enjoyment that we would have, that spontaneity that would be there. When the spontaneity's not there, something is lost. Everybody's Live seems like nothing but spontaneity, and I think that's one of the things that I enjoy about it so much. I wanted to, we're going to finish up here pretty quick because I want to be very, very, thank you. You've already gone longer than what we said we were going to go, so thank you, Jed. I can't thank you enough for doing this. Are you keeping up with my next guest? Did you watch the Caitlin Clark episode yet?
I have not watched the Caitlin Clark episode. Been meaning to. I love watching the evolution of Dave. He went from being, like I spoke about how when I was an awkward teenager, he was a kind of, a model for someone who was also at least presented himself as, an outcast.
Yes.
And, who had no patience for superficiality or the trappings of the entertainment business. And then he evolved into, an extraordinary, not that he wasn't this to begin with, but a broadcaster, like someone
Yes.
who was, kind of not unlike Regis Philbin, who you could just kind of put out there and he would speak from the heart in a way that, uh, uh, is clearly genuine.
Authentic. Yeah.
Yeah, which is so funny because, he had this reputation as this, sardonic, wise ass
Yeah.
back in the day.
Yep.
And, I think it made when he was, in his later years able to, tell stories about his family life, all that more special because you knew that he was, as so many put it, he had no, he was not comfortable talking about these things
Not the most
unless they
vulnerable
felt
guy in the
like it.
world, was he?
Right. Yeah. And to me, my next guest is an extension of that. I love that he didn't go the Carson route and he didn't, just, he doesn't hang out on his yacht and enjoy the company of the Bob Newharts or whatever, but that's
Yep.
the extent of it. Like he's clearly seems to enjoy being on television on his own terms these days. And as a lifelong fan, that's really thrilling to see. And, he has this genuine interest in the folks who he chooses to interview on my next guest. And that too is really great to see in a world where, there continues to be a lot of kind of transactional interviews taking place.
Yeah, and I don't know the exact inner. Well, I know some of the inner workings of how guests are chosen and subjects are chosen for that. But one of the things that Rick Sheckman said to me before we started this show, when we were just talking about Dave, was that you want people who want Dave to like them or whatever. One of the things they don't just want Dave to like them. They want him to be curious about them, because when Dave is curious about something, it leads to a whole bunch of fascination, because he will ask questions that are fascinating and he'll bring out these different angles, these different things. Like I think about the U2 special, and I mean I've liked U2. Gosh, they were one of my, like when Rattle and Hum came out in elementary school, that got my attention. And then I was the kid when Achtung Baby came out. I was just like, it melted my mind when that album came out. So I've loved U2 for a long time. I go and watch this thing on the Disney Plus special that they did with Dave interviewing, Bono and The Edge, and then going in Dublin. The way that they presented it, you could tell there was some genuine curiosity there, and it showed. And that was what Rick always said. Rick always said, "Oh, he's a very like." There was a chance where I was this close to kind of connecting with Dave. It didn't end up happening, but the advice that he gave me was he's an extremely kind man. He'll be very, very kind. And if he's curious about you, he'll ask you all sorts of questions. And that's the thing that I love watching on my next guest, when he's curious about his guest. Like when he had Lewis Hamilton on, for example, and you know how much Dave is a racing aficionado, or loves racing and owns a racing team and all this sort of stuff. I love that very much. I love seeing Dave, to the point where he's getting Lewis Hamilton to spray him with champagne at the end of the episode. I love that. I love that Dave is doing that right now. And could not agree more. Jed, is there anything that you wanted to say coming in here? And I again, everyone's got to understand, I've asked Jed for a long time to be on this show, and I honestly think that he has come on because of pity. But I'll take it. I'll take pity. I don't care. I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful you've done this, Jed, and I'm grateful that I have line where I can every once in a while reach out and poke you, and we can go back and forth on things. Is there anything else that you would kind of thought? You don't do very many of these. Have you done many of these? Is this?
Nobody asks me. So thank you for asking. And I apologize for my long-windedness. And, it is hate hearing I've given a few interviews about the site that are text-based. I'm, to read myself quoted is a painful experience. I don't speak in complete sentences. Half of the things I say don't make any sense. So thanks for putting up with me. If there's one thing, we didn't talk at all about Letterman TV and the work that
Walter and team are
Walter
doing.
Kim
Yep.
does to keep the flame alive for the old shows. And I don't have a Samsung TV. My in-laws do. And my son knows how to, we'll go over there for dinner and he knows exactly how to draw me out of a conversation. All he has to do is fire up the Samsung TV and I'm sucked in. And he enjoys it too, which is really great to see. It's been great fun, first through the work that Don Giller had done, and now through the work that Walter Kim is doing to see this stuff have an afterlife. And for so long, it felt like late night television was just this disposable thing that airs once or twice. If it happens to be make the cut as a rerun,
Yep.
and then goes away. And yet, I think there really is it's really engaging for those of us who lived it and beyond to get to experience it again. So my hat is off to them. I'm grateful to them and grateful to you for building a community around fellow Letterman aficionados. And you've been a great help to us as well in reaching out to some of your past interview subjects. So thank you for being a liaison.
I appreciate that. Anything that I can do to help you guys, I will do happily and anytime. Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, Walter and team. And by the way, Walter also peanut butter manufacturer as well. Sag peanut butter. Get it in the New York area. There you
I
go.
love it.
Walter Kim's. I'm allowed to say that Walter said that I can say that he's behind Sag peanut butter, and he is. So anyway, if you live in the New York area, go find it. Ask Rupert where you can get it because he's the one that
Where
sent me
does
the
he
bottle.
find the time? He's grinding peanut butter.
And grinding content out of the Letterman archives, which are vast. I had the same thing. I don't have a Samsung TV. And I know a lot of these clips end up on YouTube with the best ofs and things like that or whatever. But I've been spending a lot of time with my mom lately, and I was up there for 3 full days last week, where I actually stayed up at her house for 3 days. And my mom actually does have a Samsung TV. And so for the first time, I said to her, I said, "Hey, do you have the Letterman channel?" And she goes, "Oh yeah, I know where that is." I'm like, "Really?" Because my mom doesn't have email. Like, so I was surprised by this. But yes, fired up the Samsung TV Plus, and we popped it on. And the first thing that we saw were some of the bumpers with the Dave's face, the stylized bumpers and stuff, the way that they move. I'm like, "Oh, this is cool." We watched the damn thing for 3 hours. We ended up. My mom's laid up a little bit. She's on crutches right now, so she's laid up. But we watched it. I just wanted to see what it kind of looked like because I've watched a lot of this stuff, right? But no, 3 hours. We just kept going and going and going. It went through some highlights of Stupid Human and Stupid Pet Tricks, and then it went to Best of Norm Macdonald was on and whatnot. And while the Best of Norm Macdonald wasn't, the completionist version that Don Giller has on his, which I have watched, before, I love the way that they bite-size these things to make it digestible. Walter and team are doing a phenomenal job. Of course, that's how you would finish things off, is by complimenting them and whatnot. You're a classy guy, Jed, and I just appreciate the heck out of you. I hope our paths cross more and more and more and more. And if there's a way that we can circle and somehow collaborate on other things, that would be an absolute pleasure for me. But at the same time, I'm just so grateful to know you. Thank you for doing this on behalf of all of us who love this stuff, all of us who are in this subculture. Thank you so much for spearheading latenighter.com. And I can't tell you how much we appreciate it as a fan base. So thank you so much, Jed.
You're very kind. The feeling is mutual. Thank you for your time.
Awesome, brother. All right. Hey, hold on. One sponsor only at the Letterman Podcast, and that is Hello Deli. Go to hello-deli.com. Rupert's still the guy at hello-deli.com. I know there's still the official Letterman store as well, so you can go there, but they have different stuff on their sites. So if you want official Late Show with David Letterman merchandise, go to hello-deli.com. Prepared and sent by hand by the legendary Rupert G himself. If you ask him really nicely, he may add onions to your order. Thank you so much. This has been another episode of the Letterman Podcast with Mike Chisholm. Coincidentally, I am Mike Chisholm. Thank you and good night. Overcoat and underpants.